train and the platform.
Cultura Inglesa
Radio.
Take me out tonight.
James Sullivan is back in the show. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you. James is an English musician based in Manchester, and today we're going to talk about the Smiths, a Mancunian band born and raised in Manchester. And on this show, we're exploring a handful of the band's lyrics, and also we're going to try to understand a bit the genius of Morrissey.
Great.
Why do you reckon Morrissey's lyrics are so good?
Morrissey manages to do, I think, a lot of things like all at once. I think, like, for a start, he writes lyrics like no one else really wrote lyrics before. He doesn't really write lyrics; he just writes words and kind of fits them somehow into music. Like, partly because of the way the Smiths wrote was really separate. You know, Johnny Marr would write music and then he'd record like little demos and literally sometimes give the tape to Morrissey to go away with, and he'd work on the lyrics. So he writes these lyrics that are incredibly long and poetic, and they read more like poems or plays or something bizarre. So he's got this incredibly unique style of writing, and he also has this incredible ability to project this voice that he has. Like, Morrissey himself during the Smiths was just a young guy from Manchester, not a rich guy, from a poor part of Manchester, which in itself is not a rich city. And he was kind of a nervous, like, geeky, awkward guy. You know, he wasn't an outgoing, confident guy, but what he did have was this incredible capacity to absorb books and plays and TV programs and movies. So he's got all these incredible pop culture and intellectual and comments on society, all these references in his lyrics, and combined with his sort of unique singing style, and then Johnny Marr and the Smiths' incredible unique sound, it makes them sound like no other band. It's one of those bands that within about 3 seconds of the song starting, it's obviously the Smiths.
Yeah. And
then within about 1 second of Morrissey singing, it couldn't be anything else in the world.
Yeah. And just as a note, Johnny Marr is the guitar player.
Guitar player in the Smiths, yeah. Guitar band, kind of. But he was also, by the end, he was also the producer of the band, and he was virtually the manager by the end of the band too. And him and Morrissey were the absolute driving force of that band, the creative driving force of that band.
And what do you mean by writing words and not lyrics?
He does this strange thing. He doesn't really necessarily have like a regimented structure to the way he writes lyrics. The sentences are really, really long, for one thing. So you wouldn't really understand how, like, you could fit such long sentences into a pop song. You know, maybe a song, but to make it a pop song, a super short and catchy pop song, is something that he does sort of better than anyone else, really.
And do you think he used to write first before listening to Johnny Marr's demos, or he had the melody in mind before writing the words?
I don't know. It's a good question. I suspect that he wrote a lot just on his own. Just, you know, he would have like notebooks with lyrics in. I'm pretty sure that's true. But then sometimes you hear like funny stories. Like I remember a story that Johnny Marr tells, and sort of in a joking, sort of laughing way. He said he wrote this beautiful piece of music, this acoustic, sort of lilting, wonderful like piece of music, and he recorded it himself on a cassette, I suppose, and then gave it to Morrissey. And then a few weeks later, or a few days later, or whatever it was, Morrissey came back to him. And he said, like, yeah, you know that song you gave me, that acoustic one? He's like, yeah, that one. It's like, okay, it's called Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. And he'd written this ridiculous song about how some girls were bigger than others, and some girls' mothers were bigger than other girls' mothers. And it's like, what have you done to this beautiful piece of music? So he definitely would have stuff like already written, but he would also sort of, you know, write to whatever Johnny presented to him, which could be anything.
Some girls are bigger than others. Some girls are bigger than others. Some girls' mothers are bigger than other girls' mothers.
And he had a good sense of humor as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think possibly the most famous like accusation that people say about the Smiths or Morrissey that it's miserable, and or it's melodramatic. I think is probably a better word, but it's also something that like Smiths fans will defend and fight against like quite angrily, because there's tons of humor and wordplay and silliness in Smith's lyrics, which is I'm not going to say that it's not talked about, because I think the Smiths are famous enough that everyone has talked about everything about them. But yeah, he's got like a real like dry Northern English sense of humour, where he'll make fun of himself and he'll make fun of these characters that he's singing about in his song.
And that's specific to the northern part of the country?
I just think the North is quite famous in England for having a very quick sense of humour and a very dry sense of humour, by which I mean it's not you're not going overboard and being really 100% super enthusiastic. You're saying something quite dry, and people might not get it straight away. You say something in passing, and
okay.
if you catch the joke, then you find it's funny, but it might just be gone. It's this kind of quick-wittedness that the north of England, and Manchester, Liverpool in particular, is associated with.
How's the humour of the south?
I don't know if there is that. I don't know if that. I think that might be the distinction, that the north has this sort of dry, quick sense of humour, and the south takes itself more seriously.
Okay.
That's a huge generalisation, clearly, but like that's the cliche.
When someone from the south speaks, I can hear the G in the end of the words, like having,
okay, yeah,
or doing. Is that right? Or is it?
Yeah. I can see that being a distinction, definitely.
Oh, and another distinction would be the letter U in words like jump or up, up. Someone from the north of England would say jump or up.
Yeah,
tighter.
I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, that actually makes sense.
If you listen to Professor Brian Cox, do you know that guy?
I do, from Manchester, yeah.
He's a very popular BBC presenter, this scientist superstar. He talks just like that. I think he's the best example.
That releases energy, and that keeps the star up. But the star is burning a lot of fuel. The sun is burning, let me remember the number, it's 500 or 600 million tons of fuel every second.
Tons, burning, up.
Yeah, you're totally right. It's up north.
Okay, back to the band. How does Manchester comes through in the Smiths' lyrics?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about how the city of Manchester affected the Smiths a little bit today, and the first thing that came to my mind immediately was, in quite a literal sense, there are quite a lot of references to Manchester, the city, in the lyrics. Mm-hmm. Not always complimentary, in fact, quite often critical, but Manchester's definitely really present in Smith's lyrics, like things like there's a song on the first record called "The Headmaster Ritual," which is about Morrissey's rather traumatic. Well, we don't know if it's Morrissey. The character that Morrissey is singing about, his terrible childhood and these terrible schools where these overly strict, sort of rather violent schools that beat out any creativity from the young kids and all that kind of idea. And so he's talking about the headmasters of these schools. He calls them belligerent ghouls run Manchester schools. So like belligerent are these incredibly aggressive ghouls, as in like ghoulish, monstrous figures run Manchester schools. Mm. Or there's all sorts of things like and even in like a silly song like Vicar in a Tutu, which is a song about a vicar wearing a tutu, as in the little ballet dancing dresses you wear. Which is a song about catching a vicar wearing a tutu and dancing around the church. But the church in the song is called the Holy Name Church, which is a church just down the road from where I am now on Oxford Road in the centre of the city. So there's all sorts of these little references that pepper the songs to give you a real sense of like place. And the other sort of quite famous example would be on the song Big Mouth Strikes Again, which is also on The Queen Is Dead. There's a real high backing vocal on the sort of chorus of the song, And that, which is actually Morrissey sped up, so they just sped his vocal up, so he sounds like this really high pitched. You think it's a female voice at first, but it's Morrissey sped up. And on the sleeve notes in the CD or the record or whatever, it's that backing vocal is credited as Anne Coates, this mysterious Anne Coates figure. And Anne Coates is a place in Manchester. It's an area in Manchester. So they gave this sort of false backing singer a sort of a joke name to reference the city. Just things like that pop up all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's listen to the classic "Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now."
I was happy in the haze of a drunken hour, but heaven knows I'm miserable now.
The first phrase is "I was happy in the haze of a drunken hour." Could you explain to us what's the meaning of happy in the haze?
Yeah. So this is sort of another. It's probably a good example of like a Smith song in lots of ways, like because it sort of sounds like the classic miserable Morrissey lyric, like "Heaven knows I'm miserable now," but inevitably it's sort of it's a real sort of silly joke and playing up to the whole idea. But that first line is about. So I was happy in the haze being this sort of a drunken hour. So he's just lazing around. He's lazy. He's doing nothing. He's had a few drinks and he's happy in this sort of blissful state of doing nothing, and it's just that's the kind of idea. Because as the song reveals, he was unemployed. He's looking for a job, and then he found a job, and heaven knows he's miserable now.
Just like you.
yeah, rings pretty true right now.
But so drunken hour doesn't mean that he was drunk.
I mean, it does, and it doesn't. You know, it suggests a laziness, and it suggests that he's got nothing to do, and so maybe he's drunk, or maybe he's just feeling drunk in the experience of this laziness or this.
Okay.
So, yeah, it sort of suggests this feeling of having nothing to do, in a rather blissful way. And
haze in that sense.
Yeah, haze would be like haze would be almost like a cloud. You know when it's hot in the city and above the street you see the sort of, it's almost like steam coming off the road.
Yeah,
this kind of blurry sort of haze. That would be a haze. So everything's a bit foggy and it's not sharp. You know, okay. You're not really concentrating. You're not really focused.
Let's jump to Ask Me, Ask Me, Ask Me.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
I do, yeah.
Shyness is nice, and shyness can stop you from doing all the things in life you'd like to.
So there's a line that goes, writing frightening verse to a buck-toothed girl in Luxembourg. What does buck-toothed girl means?
Yeah, well, I can't explain why and who this girl is that he's talking about, but I can explain the words at least. Buck-toothed would be, so this is somebody who's got prominent teeth, large, sticking out, prominent teeth, a bit like a horse or something like that. Mm-hmm. So he's writing frightening verse. He's presumably writing some terrible poetry to a girl with large, prominent teeth in Luxembourg for some reason.
Spending warm summer days indoors, writing frightening verse to a buck-toothed girl in Luxembourg. Ask me.
And he talks a lot about shyness. Has got shyness is all over the song.
Yeah.
And like a lot of other songs, there's also this.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I think that's like, it's definitely one of the prominent things that comes out often in Smith songs is this idea of being outside of something, which I think sort of feeds into the Manchester thing as well. Actually, like being outside a scene, or you're outside something that's happening, and you're outside a party. Morrissey always places himself outside of a room. You know, he's always the guy writing about the thing that's happening. He's never doing the thing. Which I can't help. I don't know if this is probably interpreting too much, but Manchester being so geographically and sort of socially separate from London, especially in the 80s, it must have seemed like a world away from the big bright lights of the city. I mean, even now it feels like a completely different planet from London. You know, I lived in London before moving to Manchester, and they're completely different environments. And especially in the 80s, when times were pretty hard economically, especially in the north. All the industry was closing down, all the factories were closing down. This kind of thing. Conservative government. There's no doubt that Morrissey would have felt that to be another aspect. He's the guy that's separated from everything. Even the city that he lives in is separate from the rest of England.
And in the same song, he uses the word coyness.
Coyness, yeah.
What would that be?
Coyness is, to be coy is to be a little bit humble, or to be, you know what I mean?
Modest?
Yeah. It's sort of to be modest, but maybe in a little bit of a false way.
Okay.
So if somebody's being, say you're at a party or something, and like a girl or a boy came up to you and said like, "Oh, my mate thinks you're really good looking," and then you go, "Oh no, they don't really saying that, are they? Not really saying." They're kind of being modest, but you're kind of happy to hear it, and you're being falsely humble. It's this kind of idea.
Next song that I've got here is Half a Person.
Yeah.
There's a line that says, "Do you have a vacancy for a back scrubber?"
Do you have a vacancy for a back scrubber?
Yeah. What's a back scrubber?
Again, the problem with, I guess, any kind of poetic like words like that is it's so much about the imagery. This song's about, I think it's about running away to London, isn't it? And so he's looking for a place to stay, and he's sort of desperate for a place to stay, and so he's asking for a vacancy in this place for like a room to sleep in, and he's like, "Do you have a vacancy for a back scrubber?" So he's sort of describing himself as a back scrubber. Scrubber being if you're when you're washing your body and you've got something in your hand and you're washing your skin and you're sort of scrubbing quite hard to get the dirt off you.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of describing himself in this really low term. That's not a real job, to be a back scrubber. but he's placing himself in this position. It's like, I'm a worthless journeying fool on the way to the big city. Will you let me in? I'm nothing more than, I'm only fit to wash your back or something like that. So it's this kind of ridiculous sort of playful, melancholic idea.
Okay, now Panic.
Panic on the streets of London. Panic on the streets of Birmingham. I wonder to myself.
Somewhere down the lyrics he says, "Hopes may rise on the Grasmere, but honey pie, you're not safe here." Where's Grasmere?
I don't know where Grasmere. That song he name checks a lot of locations around the UK. It's like Panic on the Streets of Birmingham.
They're quite famous places like Leeds, Birmingham, London. But Grasmere, there's Dublin, Dundee in Scotland.
Yeah,
but Grasmere,
Grasmere is it's a little village in the Lake District, which is kind of in the north of England. It's a really beautiful mountainous region with lots of lakes. It's called the Lake District. So why he's referencing Grasmere, I'm not completely sure.
And honey pie is a nice
honey pie is an affectionate little way of talking to somebody, but it also sounds a little bit patronising when it comes out of Morrissey's voice as well. It's kind of interesting. It's like if you refer to a loved one as honey pie, it might be quite sweet, but it could also be quite patronising to sort of say it. So I think it's got a double edge to that.
Well, he always got a double edge to it.
Yeah. That's why it's like I'm really interpreting like way too much, really, because it's so much about imagery in Morrissey songs, and you can't. I keep slipping into the trap of like saying Morrissey's doing this, but it's characters. He's writing about characters. It's not necessarily him. Some may be him, but most probably aren't. I think that's an easy mistake to make with Morrissey.
same song, he goes, on the lead side streets that you sleep down. Sleep down is a way to say that you're walking down the road.
Yeah, it sort of suggests that someone's maybe slipping down there quickly without being noticed, sort of running down maybe. So slipping down is a very easy movement. You know, to slip is when you know, if something's wet on the floor, then you slip, then you fall over. Mm-hmm. So it's this idea of just a quick movement somewhere.
And side streets would be secondary streets, not the main ones.
Yeah, just little back streets, alleyways, this thing. Cool,
man. And to wrap it up, what's your favourite Smith song?
God, I should have thought about that. I should have guessed you were going to ask me that. Like, I really, really love. It's a really hard question. That they're a band that like they're only around for 5 years, but they've sort of left a huge mark in that time. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to go with. I'll change my mind in about 2 minutes. But the song, The Queen is Dead, from the album The Queen is Dead, so the first track on that album. Is I think that's a good. I think that's a great Smith song for lots of reasons. The music's great. The riffs are great. It's got a sort of a bit more aggressive's not the word, but a bit more driving than some other Smith songs maybe, which possibly appeals to like what I like. And the lyrics are absolutely like they are exceptionally funny lyrics from Morrissey. So he's doing the thing that he does a lot, which is like attacking authority figures. In this case, the Queen. The Queen is dead. He's kind of and there's a sort of a good reveal in the middle of the song where he's asking Prince Charles, so, our future king, if he ever really, so I pray, Charles, don't you ever crave to appear on the Daily Mail dressed in your mother's bridal veil? So he's asking, do you wish you could wear like your mum's clothes, your mum's wedding outfit, the Queen's wedding outfit, and be on the front page of the newspaper? He's sort of sneering at Charles. And then at some point in the song, he has this horrific realization that he checks the records and he looks through the archives and he discovers that he, in fact, is a member, a distant relation of the royal family. So he's part of this whole thing. And it's just a really, it's just a sort of silly, clever, incredibly over-the-top, dramatic Smith song. And I think that's probably when they're at their best, with Johnny Marr doing brilliant stuff as usual.
And do you think they're still quite big in Manchester?
Yeah, they are. Manchester loves the Smiths. Like, there's references to the Smiths all over the place in Manchester. There's pictures in bars, and they're really loved in the city, definitely still.
Brilliant. So we're finishing with The Queen is Dead.
Cool.
And I hope you can come back, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's fun. It's like,
and you're my favorite guest by far.
Ah, come on.
So. Yeah.
I'm being coy now. Come on.
So hopefully see you in a couple of months.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Queen is dead, boys. It's so lonely on a limb. That's the cord that breaks your body.